Thank you, Tamina, and thank you to the panelists. Really enjoyed this discussion, as also the other discussions earlier today in the morning. In fact, I was mentioning a short while ago to Prita that one of my dreams is to really sit and attend one of these events instead of arranging one of these events, so you can actually sit and listen. And Prita was telling me that, you'll have to retire before you do that. So she made me very sad. But on that cheerful note, let me go to the next India Stories, number 4 of 5, and it's by Ramanan Laxminarayan, founder and president of One Health Trust. As you can see, the title is One World, One Health, Ancient Paradigms and Modern Public Health. And if the title sounds cerebral, that's only opposite, because I was having a conversation yesterday with Ramanan in one of our other events, and he was talking about setting up the Aspen for India. And the topics that he was talking about and the way that he approached them really was incredibly fascinating. So I'm sure you'll enjoy this next speech by Ramanan.
Thanks, Sanjeev. Thank you, Sanjeev, for the invitation to be here. And I'm sure Kamal feels the same way. Academics don't get invited to events like this, so it's a bit unusual in that sense. But, such great work, and it's fabulous to see everything that's going on a lot. I mean, I spend most of my time in India, and I don't know about a lot that's already happening there. So we're in Silicon Valley, the land of the possible, where anything is possible. Imagine you were put on a spaceship or a time travel ship, and you were sent forward 1,000 years. What would you report back was the most remarkable thing that happened during the 20th century, or maybe the early part of the 21st century? You could pick one thing.
The internet.
The internet. I would have expected that. Anyone else? Mobile phones, antibiotics. Anyone else? Or the thing that happened? The pandemic? Well, I would say perhaps, and this is not my words, this is what Larry Summers, the former Treasury Secretary, said. And he said, when historians look back at the 20th century, the thing that they will remark on is the remarkable increase in human longevity. Remarkable increase in human longevity. If you look at trends in human longevity over, centuries, it's always sort of hovered between 30, 32, based on how good your data was. Take India, for instance. Life expectancy at the time of independence in 1947 was 32 years. Today, it's 70 years. It's more than doubled over that period of time. So yeah, a lot of great things happened, but as human beings on this planet, this is what was the unexpected, and we couldn't have predicted that this would really happen. And what really caused this was what we call public health. So if you ask what public health is, it's really the things that you can think of. It's about all the stuff that brought down infectious disease mortality in the United States from 800 per 100,000 down to where it is today. It's about health departments. It's about sewage not coming back into your house. It's about having water. It's about vaccines. A little bit is also about antibiotics, a topic that I'm very passionate about, but it wasn't entirely that. It was just about pure public health. And if you just take vaccines alone, this is the percentage reduction in disease globally because of vaccines. Diphtheria almost gone. Hepatitis B, 83% reduction. Pertussis, you don't even hear about it. Polio's gone for the most part. Measles almost gone. This is what it looks like. Remarkable success story. So as bad as we think things are a lot better than they ever used to be, right? Much, much better. But then you've got these other trends that are happening. So this is childhood obesity, or this adult obesity in India from 1975 onwards, ticking upwards. We think obesity is only here. It's everywhere. And this is not just an urban phenomenon in India, it's a rural phenomenon as well. It's very visible. For those of you who visit India now, you just see that obesity is a lot more visible. And what's behind it, I had to bring in the quote from Sanskrit, from Ayurveda, and this is basically to say that without proper diet, medicine is of no use, and without proper diet, you don't really need medicines, right? And we know that at some level, but the whole system seems to be pushing back on us in some way that we can't really change what we are doing. Now, this is what, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan just passed away 2 days ago, and he was responsible for a lot of, what happened in India because of the Green Revolution. Remarkable increases in just a space of 1 or 2 decades that had not been seen in the previous 2,000 years happen in India because of that. And this is the increase in cereals and vegetables and fish and meat. Everything went up, which means that stunting was reduced. People ate a whole lot better. But there's one green line on the top. I don't know if you can see that. This is the one crop that increased the most beyond anything. Do you know what that was? No, wheat's already there. That's cereals. Sugar. Did anyone say sugar? Sugarcane. So if you're looking for where the obesity epidemic is coming from, it's because India grows a remarkable amount of sugar, far more, and this is really our most successful crop in some sense. So on the one hand, we've had the improvements, but on the other hand, we're doing things that not just cause disease, but also result in a lot of water loss. I mean, sugarcane consumes a huge amount of water and is particularly vulnerable to other problems as well. We have coming problems which are related to antifungal resistance. So I don't know if you know this, but we only have 2 classes of antifungals that work for us, right, in humans. And these are the same ones that we also use in agriculture. We don't really have an option for using these. And when these become resistant, then we have far more disease. We've had 3 new fungal pathogens that attack humans just in the last 20 years that we never had before. And a lot of these are resistant. We're losing land. 30% of land is under desertification, and a lot more is in the process of becoming desertified. Just because although we have the Green Revolution, it's now becoming quite apparent that that is not a long-term solution. We can't use that chemical-based, highly water-intensive form of agriculture anymore. We just need to have, some kind of paradigm shift which is quite different from what we've been doing in the past. We already have global loss of soil carbon. I don't know how many of you watched the Netflix documentary Kiss the Ground. If you haven't, I'd recommend you watch it. A lot of our carbon is not in the atmosphere. It's actually in soil. It's actually sequestered in soil, but we've released it, and a lot of the release has become because of agriculture. If you look at greenhouse gas emissions, about 25% is just because of agriculture, which includes livestock, of course, but a whole quarter of the climate problem is right here. So what have I just told you? We have a health issue. We've improved some things, but health is very tied to the climate and to how we're doing agriculture here. And meanwhile, look at trends in mean temperature in India, steadily going up, same as happening everywhere else. But the difference is that India is a tropical country, 700 million people dependent on agriculture, and large-scale crop losses will be devastating in India. It's something that other countries could survive with, but with India, that's most of the country that's really at risk. And there's no easy way to get out into some other place. So this is all the vulnerability of agriculture to climate change. These are government numbers, and you can see large parts of the country are highly vulnerable to climate change. Now, this was my ancient Indian wisdom. You all thought there was Indian wisdom from India. Actually, it's Indian wisdom from this Indian chief in Seattle, after whom Seattle is named. And I think we're discovering this new idea of the web that really connects us, right? Which is that we are really part of this web of life. And as I think maybe Kamal, you said it, you disturb one thing and you're messing with other things. So it's not easy to just say, we'll grow this kind of tree without really knowing what the full impacts are. And every time we try to do these partial solutions, we solve for one thing, but then we don't take into account that effect of that partial solution and everything else, because we've sort of lost, in some sense, that holistic way of looking at things, but that's what we really need to recover. Now, I give you this example. This is the Rudall Institute. It's in Pennsylvania. This is sort of the home of organic agriculture in the United States. This was created in 1947, and guess what? The Rudall Institute is really where much of the global thinking on organic agriculture itself is born, and now regenerative ag, which are potentially our solutions for how ag can both be climate change resilient, but also contribute to carbon sequestration in the soils. Because if you can use regenerative ag, if you have live soils, then you can basically sequester carbon. But Rudall got his whole set of ideas from this man, who's known as the father of the organic movement. His name is Albert Howard. How many of you have heard of Albert Howard? 1, 2, of course, yes. Not the professors don't count, everyone else. Albert Howard was the father of the organic movement. Without this man, there would be no Whole Foods, there'd be none of the fresh vegetables that you're so lucky to have in California. And he wrote this book, The Agricultural Testament in Soil and Health, guess what? He was sent by the British government to India in the early 1900s to go teach Indians how to do agriculture properly using chemicals in the same way that Britain was doing so successfully. He went and spent a number of years there. In fact, he was a guest of the Maharaj of Indore, who said, listen, that's not how we do it. We actually have the cow be part of the process. We actually have everything in a full cycle in the land, nitrogen cycling, carbon cycling on the land. And he wrote these books to basically say, listen, actually, the methods we're trying to impose on the Indians really don't make much sense. We need to learn from them because they have the long-term sustainable way of doing agriculture. And this book was phenomenal in influencing many people, including, of course, what happened as the organic movement here. All by way of saying that these ideas and solutions are not just in one place, and they're just not with the kind of technology that we're used to. They might be in places where they don't get credence because, it's the knowledge of, some poor farmer. In the place in which we work, we're around 13 villages in north of Bangalore in Karnataka. The farmers actually use about 40 different concoctions which are all natural, using different kinds of leaves, cow urine, all of the stuff, which is what they actually use. Not because they're enamored with it, but because it's much cheaper than using pesticides, which would be the alternative. So this is how it's always traditionally been done. And now we're sort of, going back and trying to rediscover this stuff. I haven't been here in a while, so I went to the CVS to get something, and I can find ashwagandha and turmeric here. I'm like, what the heck? I mean, this wasn't here when I was here 3 years ago, for instance. So I think we're learning some of this. And essentially this recognition that we live in this world where the problems we face, whether climate change, pandemics, or drug resistance, all require approaches that require interconnectedness is really what we need. And we need to have conversations around solving not just climate, but solving climate along with human diets, along with health. And that's really what we do. This whole concept is known as One Health, by the way. So this has really gained traction as being One Health. And what we do in our team is really to use multiple disciplines, a team of about 50 people around the world, to use these to conduct actionable policy-oriented research. So this is the way to our campus, which is just about 30 minutes north of Bangalore Airport, in this beautiful place that's just surrounded by forest, where essentially, as Sanjeev mentioned, we're creating this Aspen or Bellagio, whatever type space, which is a place to do research. We have labs, but also to have conversations which are around ways of doing, working on these issues, but while also, feeding the world. This is not meant to be some airy-fairy place where you don't take into account the fact that you actually have a whole planet to feed, and we need to find food for the 8 billion people. But we need to find it in ways that are different from what we're doing right now. And unless we start with that starting point, and I'm focusing on ag and health, that unless we recognize that the current system is just not going to work, unless we recognize that, we're not going to be able to find these solutions. So the work we do is research. Fortunately, we've done about 13 years worth of research that has been funded widely. So we continue doing our global work in India itself. The aspiration is that it's not just about a place in India to do work just for India. If Stanford can do stuff that impacts the rest of the world, there's no reason why institutions can't be in India and doing work that impacts the rest of the world. I think we should absolutely aspire for that. We shouldn't just be looking at what we do in India as just for India alone. Why? We could find other solutions as well. We have community engagement. We work with the farmers. We learn from them, from the 13 villages around us, but we also try to help them. We help with education. We help with water management, with sustainable food. And then we have PhD programs, so we do a whole bunch of academic stuff, which is really around creating the next generation of scholars who think in this way, who really are thinking in a One Health fashion, not thinking disciplinarily. I think that's a major failing of how we've done things in the past, to think that if you just learned just one discipline, you could solve problems. The most interesting problems in the world, I think, are all lie between disciplines, which I think is why Silicon Valley is so successful, because it's not discipline bound. People just go at it with whatever needs to be learned to figure it out, rather than saying, I only do X or I only do Y. We publish papers, that's what academics do, but we publish at a global quality of scale. So, we basically are keen that everything we're doing in India, it really hits that global audience. I know someone in the morning said, well, publishing in Nature is not enough. But you know what? If you don't publish in Nature, then stuff in India becomes just folk knowledge rather than being something that the rest of the world accepts. So think of publishing in Nature as that seal of approval that a wide range of people will then accept. That's not the end of the story, but you have to start that story. And you have to realize that, you know, many of these sort of levers are held in the West right now, right? This is where those institutions are. And we've got to create those institutions there as well, which are then going to level the playing field so that what we have to say, what we find, what we consider traditional knowledge can get much wider. Otherwise, it'll only stay as traditional knowledge. In fact, you know, the word traditional knowledge somehow means that it's of the past and no longer relevant in the future. But I'm willing to bet that these are going to be the things that change things for us in the future. You know, fortunately, we're well funded because we do global research, we do it out there. But we are in the process of building this Aspen-like space with a place for reflection, for people to come, you know, do residency programs, you know, spend the time, write a book, think of your next startup, whatever it is. And I'd really encourage you all to consider this as a place which you folks in the Bay Area would engage in and both help build, but also, you know, come and spend and see as an intellectual home for you. This is not a place just for people with PhDs. This is a place for people who just want to think of what the solutions will be. And like I said, I don't think anyone has a monopoly or needs a PhD to think about those. I think those solutions will come from literally anywhere. So I think just to wrap it up, the three things that I would have in mind is first, let's not try to solve problems in these narrow, siloed ways. I think our solutions to climate will have to solve for diet. If we don't do that, we've lost an enormous opportunity. Our ways to solve for diet and climate and agriculture will also have to think about water. If we don't think about all of these, you know, in some ways that are connected, we will end up making some big mistakes. And if you really think about it, the Green Revolution was a huge success, but by some token was also, you know, a mistake, right? Of course, you know, when we had to import wheat from the United States, we absolutely needed to do the Green Revolution. But if we had sat and thought about was there a way to do that better than what we, you know, the way it happened, perhaps there might have been other ways to do it. I mean, there's not a second guess the great work that happened. No question it staved off famine in India. But I think going forward, we have now the vantage point to think about these much more carefully. The second is to say that, you know, the past is certainly not as glorious as it might seem, and the present is certainly a lot better than the past in many ways. But if you read again Jared Diamond's Collapse or any of these books, and this is also true with agricultural productivity in India, you'll find that the tremendous increases in productivity have started flattening out over the last 5 years. So don't expect that the past is an indication of future performance. Things will sort of change, and when they change very suddenly. So the idea of collapse is that these collapses come precisely at the point when societies are at their peak, right? That's the whole idea of collapse. And when that collapse happens, it happens very fast. It happened in Cambodia, it happened in Indus Valley, it happened to the Mayans, it happened many times over, and we're not special. We're certainly not special. The last thing I'd encourage you to do is perhaps think of India as a place which is not just a place of problems, but also a place of solutions. There are many things that I've seen in the 10 years that I've really lived in India that have been incredible solutions in India, which, you guys all pay attention to what we do for the lunar landing, for instance. But, 7 years ago, an Indian company developed a vaccine against rotavirus, entirely indigenously developed with some, help from US NIH, which was 1/15 the price of the prevailing rotavirus vaccine. So today, children, not just in India, but all around the world, particularly in Africa, have access to a vaccine that's incredibly cheap compared to what happened before. And this is a story that's never told. I mean, this is, in the fields in which I work, I see these amazing things originating from India. So I would say we really need to think of India as a place where we will find solutions. But to do that, we've got to go and build the institutions for science, for technology, and for convening. And Davos doesn't have to be in Davos. Aspen doesn't have to be in Aspen. We could be doing a lot of these things in India, and I certainly hope the next such meeting, I mean, given that I found half the audience here is in Bangalore, maybe it should be in India. Thank you very much.